Okay, has everybody had a chance to see Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings? We can run a spoiler-esque episode about the various stuff in it. Okay, well, rules of the medium say I kinda have to, but I guess we'll get straight to the point of it, and I'll try to squeeze something everyone can enjoy bonus episode out in the near-term future, but for now, let's get into it. So we got our final answer about the Mandarin in the MCU. There wasn't one. There was an ancient immortal Chinese warlord from at least 1,000 years ago, which is still actually pretty new as far as the record of histories in East Asia goes, but okay. With magic ring weapons, who ran a secret army called the Ten Rings over centuries and into modernity, he kept to the background well enough that he was really more like an MCU Kaiser Soze human cryptid sort of deal, where the idea of him was more important than his literal presence, so the Ten Rings activities we've been hearing about really were mostly the made-up version. Outer Killiam and AIM were revealed to be running an Iron Man 3, and they just appropriated. Really nice touch having Wenwu use that phrase specifically and be more than just a little annoyed about it from the real thing, and Wenwu never called himself the Mandarin because, look, it's not a great villain name anymore in 2021. Everyone knows it's a language, an orange, or a chicken dish now. I mean, sorry, not everything can stay. Every random Asian noun can also be a bad guy name is not one of those. Either way, this top-down reinvention, great new character, great performance, long overdue for Tony Leung to get a big star, hey, check this cool-ass guy out, part in a big Hollywood movie, but better late than never, and hey, yeah, especially on subsequent viewings, I'd say strong case can be made. Wenwu is up there with Kingpin and Loki as top-tier Marvel villains, and probably close to number one just by virtue of being such a well-acted rendering of such a complicated character, especially considering the unusual arc the audience gets with him, where he's doing the over-the-top fantasy bad guy thing first, then for most of Act 2, he's this unexpectedly human guy who's relatable and sad, almost sympathetic, and then he's Kung Fu Darth Vader in Act 3. Hard to pull off, it works. Real talk, first time through, I was sort of, really? They went with the Ten Rings doesn't teach women to fight for some reason, overcoming sexism arc for Shai Ling for lack of seemingly anything else to do, even though it eventually worked out. But on second watch, with the context of how the family dynamic is framed, I feel like that aspect didn't need such explicit spelling out, but it does fit the broader angle of their working of in terms of not necessarily being 100% on the side of assimilationist or isolationist approaches to Asian immigrant diaspora experience, which is such a huge part of she and her father relating to Shang-Chi and Awkwafina as Katie. Also, sidebar to that, is her first meeting with Katie the first time in forever that a movie has done the two female characters are introduced, the edgy one does the I like your outfit, makeup, look, etc. thing, and it's not a setup to a just kidding, fuck you punchline, you know, like she's just actually paying a compliment. Anyway, it's one of those, it's the little things moments that makes the difference between good to very good use of genre formula, and in terms of post-credit scene number 2, the implication that she's looking to reform the Shadow Empire side of the Ten Rings as effectively a millennial girl boss successor to her father is just a delightful setup in terms of premise, and also, look, the MCU could use that, since as hard as parts of Daredevil Season 2 tried, you're never going to rehabilitate the hand from the fact that the parody version of Ninja Turtles got culturally established first, so you might as well just make a fun new thing. Can you believe this is Meyer Zhang's first big movie? She kinda crushed it. Hey, Emil Blonsky is alive, and he looks more like comic book Abomination now, and is friends-ish with Wong, I guess. Presumably we'll find out more in She-Hulk, which, speaking of, Bruce Banner apparently can look like himself again, at least as of a post-credits scene. Did something get fixed, or unfixed? Like, did he break down again? Wait, are we getting Joe Fixit in She-Hulk? Hey, Benedict Wong as just Wong is here, and not just for that cameo either. He's the one who turns up to Nick Fury, Shang-Chi, and I guess Katie as well. You know, I don't recall them specifying what her honors degree from Berkeley was in, but probably something useful, and she certainly shot the hell out of that bow, so alright, into the Avengers, or whatever the next thing's gonna be called. Apart from just Wong being fun, I like the general immediate Doctor Strange tie-in as an elegant solution for two problems Marvel may have been looking to, get out ahead of in terms of, we can't just put every Asian actor or character into our Kung Fu franchise, that's probably not okay, and the deeper you get into the Doctor Strange franchise, the more not great anymore Orientalist appropriation stuff you're going to bump into, just because of how his magic system was written back in the day. So let's just mash these two properties together right the hell away and start mixing things up. Good idea, and we get more Benedict Wong. He's cool. Hooray, Trevor's back! I'm so happy, and even happier they're giving him something like a redemption arc. Like, he didn't save the day, but he did help the heroes. He was standing up there with everyone else, at least for a little while during the big battle. He kinda saved Morris. And hey, speaking of which, he's the reason Morris is in the story, and everyone loves Morris, right?
What the hell? What the frick? Oh! What is that? Oh! Who? What's what? That! What is that? You can see Morris.
Morris?
Oh, Morris! They can see you. You're real. All this time I thought I was hallucinating him. Oh, this is such fat news.
Where's his face?
He's a bit sensitive about that.
Now that he's confirmed back around, I hope Trevor sticks around a while, and I hope they keep bringing him back, either in this franchise, elsewhere in the series. I'm not sure if they ever said if he stuck around in Ta Lo or not, but yeah, speaking of which. Okay, now to the nitty-gritty stuff. As you may have discerned from the movie itself, depending on how eagle-eyed and pre-informed you are vis-a-vis Chinese folklore, yes, Ta Lo, in the film The Magical Other Dimension, full of portal mountains and big floofy magic animals, where Shang-Chi's mother's village is located and where the big final battle takes place, does exist in the comics as essentially Chinese Asgard. And as we've discussed before in previous episodes, in the comics universe, the Norse gods and mythology were real, but it was just aliens the Vikings thought of as gods and built a religion around concept also applies to most of the other ancient polytheistic religions like the Greek, Mayan, Aztec, Egyptian, and Hindu pantheons, and while it doesn't come up as often, it also applies to the gods and godlike beings of Taoism, which in Marvel lore are a race called the Xian, which occupy a pocket dimension called Ta Lo, which appears here in the MCU to be a version of that, although we don't meet any god beings at least yet, other than the Great Protector Dragon, though I wouldn't be shocked if this comes up again in Eternals. And also it being full of portals via the 5 mountains, all but definitely a reference to the 5 pillars of Earth being the fingers of the Buddha's palm and some versions of Sun Wukong, the Monkey King's origin and journey to the west. Michelle Yeoh's Yin Yan referring to it as a nexus between dimensions makes me suspect it may be related to or an MCU swap out for the nexus of all realities, which is a key part of the Marvel multiverse cosmology originally introduced in the Man-Thing comics way back in the day. $1,000,000 question. This is a giant dragon. Is it the MCU Fin Fang Foom? I feel like probably not. They might save the funny name one for something like Guardians, where it being more alien-like can be an excuse to let the name slide, considering this is a very different design from Fin Fang Foom typically has, and also they kind of made a specific point about East Asian-sounding names that are not actually in this movie, so probably not the place for Fin Fang Foom to show up. But, you know, hey, either way, we got a giant dragon now. That's pretty cool, and it wasn't even our only giant monster. So surprise twist number 1, Wenwu's evil plan isn't actually his evil plan. A demonic force is calling to him in the voice of his dead wife, Shang-Chi and Xiaoling's mother, and has convinced him that she is alive but imprisoned in Ta Lo and wants him to use the 10 rings to set her free. Surprise twist number 2, it's not her, it's actually the giant soul-devouring demon and its minions that Ta Lo exists to keep locked up in the first place. Huh. Good thing no one else with crazy powerful abilities and not a 100% grasp of where they came from or how they work has been hearing pleas for help from dead or missing or its complicated loved ones recently, huh? Because that could go badly. And in case you think that's a reach, Yingnan identifies the monster by name as the Dweller in Darkness, an old-school Doctor Strange enemy who traditionally looks like a Masters of the Universe version of Cthulhu and pretty much served the same purpose as all the other unofficial versions of H.P. Lovecraft monsters in the Marvel Comics until they started doing Conan books and could then just use actual Cthulhu because Conan is part of the Cthulhu mythos. That is still canon, by the way. Here it has more of a bat kaiju dragon monster look, but it still has tentacles, so is this the monster that's been popping out of those portals all over the multiverse in episodes of What If? That wouldn't shock me. Neither would it showing up in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness or Spider-Man No Way Home, or at least getting a mention. Alright, so what are the 10 rings? Where'd they come from? What are they for originally? What are they going to be? That I don't know. You might remember, since we just reposted the episode again especially, that back in 2019, so 2 years ago, before we even knew what form the MCU version of the Mandarin's rings were actually going to take, or we even saw any footage from Shang-Chi, that it'd have something to do with the Eternals, since 10 rings, 10 main Eternal characters, at a certain point in the comics, each of the rings was supposed to have an individual powerful alien spirit trapped inside, etc. Say, how many of the ancient alien Eternals are in the principal cast of The Eternals? 10. There are 10 of them. Ah, that's it, number 10! Ha ha! 10. So, assuming the Mandarin did name the 10 rings after his 10 actual rings, do the rings belong to the Eternals, maybe? Did they lose them? Are they looking for them? Are they themselves the rings somehow? And regardless of the answer, does that mean that these are going to be this decade of Marvel movies' version of the Infinity Stones for everyone to chase around and pretend like they matter? Am I correct about that, and that they'll become the Phase 4 and onward answer to the Infinity Stones? Maybe. The Eternals part I feel like is at least going to get partway there. The stones thing, not so much. Since Loki went out of its way to say, hey, we're going into a section of this where this kind of thing isn't even that powerful anymore by comparison, so who can really say? In the first big post-credits scene, everyone involved agrees that the rings are really old, powerful, and no one knows where they came from or what they've started sending a beacon to, and according to Shang-Chi's director, they didn't set down anything definite themselves, so I bet Marvel hasn't either. Much like with the Infinity Stones themselves, they prefer to leave these things open-ended so that the other movies can fill it in later, because the continuity stuff actually connects better when the details are getting retrofitted in backwards. Though, if I had to guess, I'd say the idea is going to be that they're connected to wherever Ta Lo and the Great Protector came from originally, and since Shang-Chi and Chai Ling, I would suppose, descends from them as well through his mother, that's why the rings worked more powerfully when he used them, and also why the signal turned on in the first place, instead of ever turning on during that 1,000 years or so when Wen Wu was using them. As to what's being signaled to and what's coming, I mean, take your pick. The Marvel Universe is bulging with different variations on big ultimate evil monster at the center of the universe who could be coming to play. Galactus, the Brood, the Dire Wraiths, Null, or even the other Fear Lords who traditionally ally with the Dweller in Darkness in the Doctor Strange stories. Either way, hey, should be interesting. Yeah, Shang-Chi killed a guy and we never found out who it was, remember that? Admit it, you forgot that this plot thread went unresolved, didn't you? But it's like the key point in his sad backstory part before all of the other magical stuff kicks in. Wen Wu sends him at 14 in 2010 to assassinate, supposedly, the man responsible for his mother's death, so presumably either the leader of the Iron Gang or some high-up person in the Iron Gang who gave the order in the first place. We can't really be sure because we don't know who it is. At first he says he didn't actually do it, then he later says, oh yeah, actually it turns out I did do it, and that's what I've been so conflicted this whole time about. And they never really deal with this, or actually answer who it was, or provide a flashback. For a while there, I thought that they were going in a direction of, oh, this is going to turn out to be, this is Katie's dead grandfather, and that's actually the reason why he hangs around her family. He feels guilty, and he's taking care of them. And I, right up to the end, thought that was going to be a thing, but also it would be really too similar to a similar plot thread that was in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I'm glad they didn't do it because I feel like that would be a bit too much for any of this to come back from. But also it feels like something that they're leaving hanging so that it can be in the sequel. Presumably once everyone else remembers that this was a plot point in the movie, people will assume that it's going to tie into bringing stuff back from Daredevil or the Netflix shows, because there's a whole contingent of people who are still convinced that the Netflix shows were actually good, instead of just being Jessica Jones was good and certain portions of Daredevil and the hypothetical idea of Luke Cage was good. And yes, we all enjoyed Jon Bernthal as the Punisher. If so, I think this probably makes the most sense as something that would come back up in a sequel. With the way these things have been mapped out, especially with the delays and such that have happened with the pandemic, I have to imagine that we might end up seeing Shang-Chi in one of the team-ups or whatever a crossover is going to be before we see him in a solo movie. And if so, especially following his first movie, which ends with a really big, like, monster battle that's very cool, but also drops away from the hand-to-hand kung fu stuff in order to have a big Marvel climax. Obvious place to go for a sequel, have a hand-to-hand person show up, own him in the first act, and then build towards, okay, now I've really got to shape up, and then have a knockdown, straight-up, hand-to-hand, blow-for-blow, one-on-one for the finale. That feels like where you go with a sequel to this sort of thing. Okay, we've already seen that he can fist fight a monster in the first one, and then the second one is down-to-earth, street tough brawl, one-on-one stuff, and I think that will probably be where they go, and it'll be pretty cool. But anyway, yeah, I don't know who he killed, but again, there are no shortage of cool martial arts characters in the Marvel canon, so bring them on. I'm Bob, and that's the big picture.